Wow, look at you. Wonderful to see you all. I hadn't actually seen that video before, I couldn't remember it, and I was just interested. It said, it's a spiritual war, and then it went on to the verse saying, but don't worry, everything's going to be all right. So it's kind of taken my whole presentation and put it into two sentences.
Did you put the microphone down?
Sorry, yes. Okay, I think I'd like to start just by saying a couple of thank yous, really, before anything else. And it's a huge thank you to Liz, who introduced me. She's done an amazing effort over the last year, very, very, very busy, doing all the bureaucracy, all the form filling, all the legal stuff, all the financial stuff, to get this wonderful new political party up and running. And I think we should thank her very, very much. Thank you. And to David Baggett is here as well. David, yes, and he's done a sterling job, and the two of them together are a fantastic team. We haven't got Andrew Bridgham with us today, I don't think, but we have got the inimitable Mr. Vobes. And thank you, Richard, for keeping us so up to date on everything that's going on out there. It's hugely appreciated, it's hugely important. But mostly, thank you to all of you who are here today. You've given up your Saturday to come here and support the Great Resist, and that's really amazing. So you should applaud yourselves for being the people who are going to make a difference. Yeah. So I'm just go on with just a small apology, and that is that I don't normally like to read notes when I'm doing a presentation. I normally like just to speak. But over the last few days, it's been a bit manic, and I've got my notes in front of me, so it's going to be a bit of speaking and a bit of reading out from my notes. I hope you can live with that. So, yeah, although this is a meeting of the Great Resist, today, forgive me, I'm going to focus really on just one element, and that is I'll be focusing on the Farmers' Food Freedom Party more than anything else, but it will bring in everything else that's on the agenda. It's really, really exciting. And I've signed up for it myself already, and I think it's going to make a huge, huge difference. And I think the more of you that can actually support it, the better. The title of my talk is actually the politics of spiritual activism. So let me just give a little bit of background and concept to what that means. So when people ask me about my own life, I always describe it as a spiritual journey. A journey that started really from when I was born and continues through to today. And I feel very, very blessed to have led the life I've led, which is very, very interesting. And every day I meet amazing people and I learn amazing new things. And what I've learned is that when we're able to fully embrace everything that comes into our lives and everything that happens to us, but learn to do it from the perspective of a slightly detached observer, so we kind of once removed from our daily self. We're on a learning journey, and that increases our general wisdom, but it also increases our compassion for other people too. So my journey has led to me writing 5 books about spirituality, spiritual activism, and leading a spiritual life. And my lovely partner Jane, who's over there, is looking after the table next door where there are books and you can come and have a browse and see what I write about. I've been to a few of the Great Resist meetings so far, and it's always an absolute joy to be in the company of so many awakened and enlightened people. That's why I feel very comfortable standing here before you, because I know everyone here is on the same wavelength, and we all share mutual concerns about what's going on out there in our increasingly crazy world. So we're all here to meet each other, listen, get new wisdom, get new insights, and to share and talk about our experiences and our own knowledge. So let me kind of start by saying that I firmly believe that we're currently in what I call a spiritual war, like the title of the song. And this is not a war like others. It's not a war of horrific weapons, missiles, bullets and bloodshed. It's a more invisible and insidious type of war. It's based on things like stealth, deception, manipulation, coercion, and often blatant lies. As Liz alluded to a few moments ago, our politicians that we vote into power we believe they should act in our interests, but it's now obvious to us who are awake that they're all dancing to the same tune. And it's a tune based on an orchestrated global agenda that we the people did not ask for and we didn't vote for. As most people in this room will already know and probably acknowledge, that the majority of politicians are currently no more than mere puppets doing their master's bidding. The sort of politics I witnessed as a child and a teenager and a young adult has now clearly morphed into something much more sinister and darker. And every day, more and more people are thankfully waking up to this sad truth. We only have to look back over the last few months of Keir Starmer's Labour leadership to see what tyranny really means. And even some of the most loyal Labour voters are absolutely horrified at what's going on, and I talk to them regularly. They're just not getting it. It seems our whole political system is crumbling, and there is an urgent need now for decent people to come together to say enough is enough. We can do better than this. That's one of the main reasons that I'm giving my full support to the new Farmers' Food and Freedom Party. It really is a breath of fresh air and a promise of better days to come for all of us. And I encourage all of you to look into it, into what's been created, and to get some leaflets if there is some available. So, in order to move forward from where we are in a visionary and a positive way, we need to start by clearly defining who we are as a collective and what we stand for. And we also need to clearly understand who our true enemies are, because they will go out of their way to try and discredit us and to divide us, particularly in the mainstream media. If we choose to take a hard look at the institutions that are currently trying to define and design the future for all of us, including all our children and our grandchildren, we soon come to the realization that the so-called master puppets are composed of a number of disparate organisations with different names, but who are all intimately interrelated and who have infiltrated government and corporations. Here are just a few names that I'm sure you will recognise. The World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, you're allowed to boo, yeah. The Trilateral Commission, boo. The Bank of International Settlements, big boo. The United Nations, the World Bank, the Council for Foreign Relations, the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Group, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, G20, the International Monetary Fund, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunisation. I could go on and on, but I think you get the gist. If we create in our minds a visual triangle, and we've put these organisations into some sort of hierarchy, then which organisation you think sits at the very top of the pyramid? It might not be who you think. Let me tell you, it is the Rockefeller family dynasty that operate through the Rockefeller Foundation, because when you trace back the roots of these organisations, that's where you find the first flowering seed. So although we might identify the perpetrators as being a number of disparate organisations, they're all ultimately part of the same umbrella Rockefeller dynasty. One of the reasons they believe that we, the people, are powerless against their agenda is that although we have created a number of organisations to defend our human rights and our freedoms, these organisations are not all connected enough, they think, to pose any sort of threat to them at the moment, whereas their pyramid is very well connected. Personally, I think the moment has come in time when that dynamic will change, and I believe firmly that the Farmers' Food and Freedom Party can be a prime catalyst on that journey. This is a pivotal moment in time because we now have the opportunity and the mechanism to make a profound difference in the world. Yes, we can all continue to be activists in our own chosen field of endeavour, whether that be calling out the dangers of 5G, trying to stop the geoengineering of our skies, calling out corruption and lies within our government, councils, or the hidden agendas of the pharmaceutical companies and the banking industry. But we're now able to unite under a banner of a new and legally legitimate political party that puts the real interests of the people first. I truly believe that if we can get this right, we can actually create that top of the pyramid in the same way that the Rockefellers have done, to engineer a potentially dystopian future for us. So what we need to ensure is that the Farmers' Food and Freedom Party succeeds. And this can only be realistically achieved if A, we avoid getting fully dragged into the corrupt and dysfunctional current political systems, but B, recognise that we have an underlying spiritual approach to the heart of our activities that makes us have a real difference. Our current political system is rotten to the core, and in my humble opinion, its days are numbered. The old system is obviously crumbling, and it's failed us. So we must be very focused on bringing a fresh and dynamic approach into not just how we operate within this new party, but how we all hold ourselves personally accountable. As I said at the beginning, we're in a spiritual war. And that means we must bring together personally the necessary spiritual tools within our own armoury. We already know the tools being used against us. Let me give you a few examples. Egotism, greed, control, oppression, tyranny, power, blackmail, bribery, distortion of truth, coercion, fear, influence, and money. Now let me list the tools we all have within us to cultivate, to both win this spiritual war and to ensure the success of this wonderful new party. Our tools are truth, integrity, morality, ethics, compassion, sympathy, wisdom, balance, equanimity, justice, vision, creativity, open-mindedness, humbleness, but focus. And I think we will know when we've succeeded in this goal, and that will be when voters start to say things about this political party, like, well, I may not agree with all their policies, but at least they always tell the public the truth, and you can trust them. Once we start to hear those words, we'll know we're doing something very, very powerful. So, Farmers' Food and Freedom needs to focus on what the people of this country really want, not what our current government wants to impose on us. And we must all learn to walk the talk. We must always speak with honesty and with integrity, even when we don't have all the answers. By doing this, we earn trust, and that is a huge forward step. This spiritual war requires that we have a few ground rules right from the start. One of our enemies is the use of labels. They don't help. Words like right and wrong, them and us, far right, extreme left, are not particularly helpful words because they only serve to perpetuate conflict and create more and more divisions amongst us. And creating division amongst us is the weapon of choice used by our oppressors. Our job is to heal divisions by practicing unity in all its different forms and focusing on what unites us rather than what divides us. We're all spiritual beings sheathed in a temporary physical form, and we can all raise our level of consciousness and become very awakened and very enlightened. Spiritual activism, when used widely, is a very powerful tool, but it does not mean spiritual pacifism or turning a blind eye to things that are unjust. True spirituality demands courage and tenacity at all times, and the pursuit of fairness and justice. To apply spiritual activism in all we do is to be constantly aware of our true nature, our own human condition. And yes, accepting that sometimes we make mistakes or we make wrong judgments. But if we remain true to ourselves at all times and always act with full integrity and follow our own moral compass, we won't go far wrong. We need to strike that perfect balance between spiritual activism and indifferent pacifism. What not so many people are aware of is that it's not simply about politicians making decisions that are in their own interests. It's about the shadowy people in the background, the bureaucrats and the advisors to government that are steering the narrative and steering the strategy. When you go deep into this subject, you soon start to realise that the political parties currently are pretty much identical at the roots, and they follow the same broad agenda, which is perpetuated and orchestrated by the authorities who remain firmly and usually invisibly in the background. But let's be clear here. We're not at war with all the people in these organisations who attempt to control us, because for the most part, they're generally decent people who've been sucked into a system that's not easy to get out of. They might play a small part, like a small cog in a big wheel, most of them totally unaware of the consequences of the actions they're taking in their day-to-day jobs, which form part of a much larger picture. It's a deliberate policy to keep these people in the dark about the bigger picture so that they feel they're making a positive contribution to a task, but not aware of where or which direction things are going in. For this reason, it's not about us and them in the sense that a lot of these people who are serving a darker agenda are not all actually evil people. They're really unenlightened people. So it's wrong to assume they are baddies and always the enemy. Yes, there are some people at the top of the pyramid who might well be labelled evil or psychopathic, but fortunately they're in the minority, and we know that their house of cards is just about to crumble. When we delve deep into the roots of what's going wrong with the world and why we're becoming a very dysfunctional society, in my humble opinion, I consider that one of the greatest barriers that we have to tackle as light bearers and torch bearers of truth, integrity and justice is the battle against our own human ego. It's a sad truth, and something that's covered a lot in my books next door, is that a lot of the people in the world today are very ego-driven rather than being spiritually driven. And it's my contention that it's one of the most deep-rooted problems that we face as a human species. It is part of the human condition, but our egos like to take dominance over the way we think and the way we act. And it is what causes many individuals to seek power over others. Taming our ego is a lifelong quest, and it's the ultimate goal for those who want to become spiritually focused. The optimum way we can move forward with this exciting new party is to make ourselves very, very different from the other political parties by applying these core foundations of spiritual wisdom to everything we do. We must all be prepared to walk the talk. We must always be truthful. We must always act with full integrity, and we must act with compassion for those who are less fortunate than ourselves. We must always act from the highest moral standpoint and not tolerate injustices or unfair laws that discriminate. I'll just give a small quote from one of the books that tackles this subject of why ego is a big problem. It's by Dr. David Frawley. Just read this paragraph. Ego arises from a failure of intelligence. It is a misjudgment or error in our perceptual process. The most important function of intelligence is to ascertain the nature of the self. Self-determination is the most primary of all determinations. Firstly, we must know who we are before we can know what the world is or what we should do. Ego arises when we fail to discern our true self, which is pure awareness, and mistake it for the body. However, once intelligence makes the mistake of listening to the ego then distorts intelligence, which then serves to rationalize it. We then use our intelligence to further the ego's goals of accumulation and achievement in the external world, and we lose track of our inner goal, which is to know our own true nature. The ego of intelligence is the hardest ego to overcome because it's so primary a misconception. Similarly, ego appropriates intelligence and uses it to justify its own reactions. Its logic is based on the premise that I must always be right. Ego thus stops intelligence from perceiving the real truths and instead imposes its own opinions as being the truth. I think it's a lot to take in that one paragraph, but it's very important. So I'm nearly come to the end of my little ramble this morning, but I will say that after studying quite extensively the things that we're going to be talking about today, I'm more and more by the day convinced that the house of cards is crumbling. And I'm very, very positive and excited that that's going to happen. And I'll just tell you one of the reasons why I believe it. There are lots of reasons. There's lots of things going on, and you probably know about this if you keep up with the mainstream news. Not the mainstream, the alternative news. Get that right? Yes. Whoops. There's a lot in the news. There's lots of YouTube videos. You can't trust them all, but a lot of them make a lot of sense. But in my own, I'm a researcher, and in my own research, what I've discovered is that when we try, I was trained professionally as a problem solver. That's my background, and I was helping different organisations solve problems they couldn't solve themselves through my career. And one of the things I learned was about the nature of problems and how they manifest and how they're solved. And there are so many examples in history where people have tried to fix a problem. It could be as large as a war. It could be less of a conflict. But when people try to solve problems through peace treaties or whatever, it rarely works. And when you delve deep into that, you find out why it doesn't work. And I'll share that with you. It doesn't work because people try to resolve major conflicts without inviting all the proper participants. They invite a selected few. If you look, for example, at just one example, the apartheid system in South Africa, from about 1948 through to 1992, it was continued bloodshed and riots and horrendous things going on. And there was endless meetings. You probably remember it. If you remember those times in the newspapers, you'll remember there was so many meetings of government with all the different people, and none of it worked. The apartheid system just perpetuated. And then Nelson Mandela had time to think about that when he was in jail for something like 27 years. And he came to the conclusion, which proved to be right, and he persuaded the South African government to bring together every different ethnic minority and every different person involved. So nobody was left out of the conversation, and he brought them all together for 2 weeks so they could talk to each other one-to-one as human beings. And that ended apartheid successfully. So what we've got at the moment, as a lot of you will be aware, is our dear friend Klaus Schwab and his WEF, who are trying to impose a new system on us called stakeholder capitalism. But what he's doing is he's trying to move that forward by inviting all his selected buddies to make the decision, and not including the people that matter, including people like us. And whenever that's been done throughout history, it fails miserably. And this is going to fail miserably as well. And that's why we're here, and that's what we're fighting for. So just to sum up, I encourage everyone here today to make a real difference by adding your support to Farmers Food and Freedom. It only costs £20 a year to become a supporter and subscriber, and what a huge difference that will make, because we'll all be pulling together to make it a success. Yeah, there will be critics of any new party. The mainstream media and the corrupt BBC will no doubt do everything they can to discredit us and try and pull us apart and divide us. But we must acknowledge that as being quite likely. And there will be a cynicism from some members of the public who just think, oh, just another political party, they won't make any difference. But that's okay. We can take one step at a time, and if we act from a spiritual heart, and we act with truth and integrity and with positivism, together we can really, really make it happen. Thank you.